Thank the gentlelady. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pichai, is Google going to tailor its features to help Joe Biden in the 2020 election?
Congressman, we approach our work, we support both campaigns today. We think political ads is an important part of free speech in democratic societies, and we engage with campaigns, according to law, and we approach our work in a nonpartisan way.
It was a yes or no question. Can you assure Americans today you won't tailor your features to help Joe Biden in the upcoming election?
We support work that campaigns do. I just want to make sure I
understand that. We all do all kinds of online, social media, all kinds of that outreach, that communication. This is a simple question. Can you today assure Americans you will not tailor your features in any way to specifically help one candidate over other? And this what I'm concerned about is you helping Joe Biden over President Trump.
We won't do any work, to politically tilt anything one way or the other. It's against our core values, Congress.
But you did it in 2016. There's an email in 2016 that was widely circulated amongst the executives at your company that got public, where Ms. Ileana Murillo, head of your multicultural marketing, talks about the silent donation Google made to the Clinton campaign, and you applauded her work. She points that out in the email. I'm just curious, if you did it in 16, I want to make, in spite of the fact you did it in 16, President Trump won, I just want to make sure you're not going to do it again in 2020.
Congressman, I recall our conversation at that time, and I appreciate your concern. We didn't find any evidence of such activity, and I took the opportunity after our conversation to reinforce to the company. We realized even an appearance could be improper, so we have clearly communicated to our employees any personal political activity, while that's their right, needs to happen on their own time and resources and should avoid any use of company.
Of course, everyone's got their First Amendment rights to campaign for who they want. What they can't do is configure your features to help one candidate over the other. So you might have not have found any evidence, but here's what she wrote to the email to a number of key executives in your company. Quote, we push to get out the Latino vote with our features. Second quote, we push to get out the Latino vote with our features in key states. Seems to me those last three words are the real qualifier here. That's electioneering when you're trying to increase the Latino vote in key states. And she'd already communicated that she was supporting Clinton, that she wanted Clinton to win. So when she talks about increasing the Latino vote, which she assumed was going to help candidate Clinton, and she's doing that in key states. It's one thing if you're going to increase the Latino vote around the country. If you're just a good corporate citizen, you're urging people to vote. It's quite another when you're focusing on in key states. And you know what those key states were? Nevada and Florida, the swing states. So again, I want to make sure this isn't going to happen in 2020.
I can assure you that we complied with laws in 2016. As a company, any work we do around elections is nonpartisan. Users do come to us for understanding where polling places are, where to vote, which is the date to vote, what the voting hours are. We are committed to providing that information, and I can assure you that we will approach our work.
So Mr. Pichai, here's the question I think is on so many Americans' minds. They saw the list that we read here earlier on in our opening statements, all the things Google has done. Google is siding with the World Health Organization over anyone who disagrees with them, even though the World Health Organization obviously lied to America, obviously shills for China. Google's siding with them, YouTube is siding with them. We have the history of all the things Google has done and the history of what happened in 2016 in the election, where they obviously, according to one of your multicultural marketing executive, tried to help Clinton. And here we are 97 days before the election, and we want to make sure it's not going to happen again. We want to can you give us two assurances? One, you're not going to try to tailor your features, configure your platform in a way to help Joe Biden. And second, that you're not going to use your search engine to silence conservatives. Can you give us those two assurances today?
Congressman, on our search engine, conservatives have more access to information than ever before.
And we appreciate that. That wasn't the question. Can you assure us today you're not going to try to silence conservatives? And can you assure us today you're not going to try to configure your features, as Ms. Murillo said you did for Clinton in 16? Can you assure us today you're not going to do the same thing for Joe Biden in 2020?
You have my commitment. It's always been true, and we'll continue to conduct ourselves in a neutral way.
Appreciate it. Yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to redirect your attention to antitrust law rather than fringe conspiracy theories. Mr. Bezos, our investigation...
Mr. Chairman, we have the email. There is no fringe.
Excuse me.
It's not your time.
Mr. Jordan, you do not have the time. Please be respectful of your
when
colleague.
someone
She
directly-
controls
directly-
the time.
Put your mask on.
Mr.
Put your mask on.
Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Raskin,
Mr. Jordan,
you want to
you
talk
do-
about math.
Mr. Jordan, Ms. Scanlon
Why would the Deputy
controls the
Secretary of
time.
Treasury unmask
Mr.
Michael Flynn's
Mr.
name, Mr.
Scanlon,
Raskin? And what I want to know
Mr.
is,
Scanlon,
when someone comes
don't
after my
control the
motives for
time.
asking questions, I get a chance to respond.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bezos, our investigation uncovered documents that show that Amazon sometimes doesn't play fairly, crossing the line from robust competition to predatory pricing to destroy rivals rather than outcompete them. And let's take the example of Quidsi, which used to own diapers.com and provided online baby care products. In 2009, your team viewed diapers.com as Amazon's largest and fastest growing online competitor for diapers. One of Amazon's top executives said that diapers.com keeps the pressure on pricing on us, and strong competition from diapers.com meant that Amazon was having to work harder and harder so that customers didn't pick diapers.com over Amazon. And the customers we're talking about were hardworking families, single parents with babies, and young children. Now, because diapers.com was so successful, Amazon saw it as a threat. The documents that we've obtained show that Amazon employees began strategizing about ways to weaken this company. And in 2010, Amazon hatched a plot to go after diapers.com and take it out. In an email that I reviewed, and we've got these up on the slides, one of your top executives proposed to you a, quote, aggressive plan to win, end quote, against diapers.com, a plan that sought to undercut their business by temporarily slashing Amazon prices. We saw one of your profit and loss statements, and it appears that in 1 month alone, Amazon was willing to bleed over $200 million in diaper profit losses. Mr. Bezos, how much money was Amazon ultimately willing to lose on this campaign to undermine diapers.com?
Thank you for the question. I don't know the direct answer to your question. This is going back in time, I think maybe 10 or 11 years or so. You could give me maybe the dates on those documents. But what I can tell you is that the idea of using diapers and products like that to attract new customers who have new families is a very traditional idea.
Sure, well,
we
let's
didn't
delve
invent that
into
idea,
this
neither
a
did
little
diapers.com.
further. I'm sorry, you know I only have a few minutes here, so I just want to press on. Your own documents make clear that the price war against diapers.com worked, and within a few months it was struggling, and so then Amazon bought it. After buying your leading competitor here, Amazon cut promotions like Amazon.mom and the steep discounts it used to lure customers away from diapers.com, and then increase the prices of diapers for new moms and dads. Mr. Bezos, did you personally sign off on the plan to raise prices after Amazon limited its competition?
I don't remember that at all. What I remember is that we matched competitive prices, and I believe we followed diapers.com. Again, this is 11 years ago, so you're asking a lot of my memory, but I believe we followed diapers.com. I can also tell you after we bought diapers.com, we put more than $300 million into trying to make it successful.
I'm sorry. So you said that Amazon focuses excessively on customers. So how would customers, especially single moms, new families, how would they benefit when the prices were driven up by the fact that you eliminated your main competitor?
Well, I don't agree, with great respect, I don't agree with the premise. At the same time, you should recognize in context, diapers is a very large product category sold in many, many places, not just at Amazon and diapers.com.
This was the online diaper market. Now, we do have evidence that these predatory...
And
I'm sorry, Mr. Bezos, I need to push on here.
Of course,
the evidence we've collected suggests that the predatory practices weren't unique here. In 2013, it was reported that you instructed Amazon employees to approach discussions with certain business partners, and I quote, the way a cheetah would pursue a sickly gazelle. Is the Gazelle project still in place, and does Amazon pursue similar predatory campaigns in other parts of its business?
I cannot comment on that because I don't remember it. What I can tell you is that we are very, very focused on the customer, as you started.
Okay.
And of
Well,
course, that
I'm
does
concerned
include
with the
bargaining very
customers
hard
as
with
well,
vendors and
especially
suppliers
the
to get the lowest
families in my
prices so that we can
district.
offer
I'm
those
sorry,
to
Mr.
customers.
Bezos, so I'm almost out of time. I'm concerned too, because especially with the current pandemic, one of the biggest needs I'm seeing at the food drives and the giveaways that we're having to run in my district is that families don't have diapers, and we have to collect them to give them out. So it certainly is something that has a really hard impact on families, and I'm really concerned that pricing might have been driven up here by this tactic, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I just announced that votes have been called, but we're going to continue with the hearing, so I invite colleagues to vote at, it's a rolling vote, so vote according to your own schedule. I now recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank each of the witnesses today for your testimony. Mr. Zuckerberg, in 2004, when you had launched Facebook, it's fair to say, I think you'd agree with me, that you had quite a few competitors. Would you agree with that?
Congressman, yes.
MySpace, Friendster, Google's Orkut, Mixi, Cyworld, Yahoo 360, AOL's Bebo, they were all competitors?
Congressman, those were some of the competitors at the time, and it's only gotten a lot more competitive since.
Well, let's talk about that, because by 2012, Mr. Zuckerberg, none of those companies that I just identified existed. You're certainly aware of that. They were all basically gone. Facebook, in my view, I think was in a monopoly by then. I wonder whether you would agree with that. I take it you don't.
Congressman, that's correct. I don't. We face a lot of competitors in every part of what we do, from connecting with friends privately, to connecting with people in communities, to connecting with all your friends at once, to connecting with all kinds of user-generated content. I mean, I would bet that you or most people here have multiple apps for each of those on your phones.
Well, Mr. Zuckerberg, why don't we dig into this a bit further? So you and I clearly disagree about that. In 2012, I'm looking at a document that was produced by Facebook in response to the subcommittee's investigation. It's a presentation prepared for Sheryl Sandberg to deliver to the board of directors of a major telecommunications firm, boasting that, quote, Facebook is now 95% of all social media in the United States. The title of the slide is even, quote, the industry consolidates as it matures. So as I look at that graph, I certainly think most folks would concede that Facebook was a monopoly as early as 2012. But nonetheless, I understand that we disagree on that point. Would you agree with me that Facebook, its strategy since that time, to essentially protect what I describe as a monopoly, but obviously what you would describe as market power, that Facebook has been engaged in purchasing competition, in some cases replicating competition, and in some cases eliminating your competition? Would that be a fair statement?
Congressman, the space of people connecting with other people is a very large space, and I would agree that there were different approaches that we took to addressing different parts of that space, but it's all in service of building the best services.
And
for
I
people
appreciate
to help
that, Mr.
connect with.
Zuckerberg. I appreciate the latter point. It sounds like you are conceding that at least some of those strategies were what I identified, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. In 2014, here's an email. It's from Facebook's current chief financial officer, described the company's acquisition strategy as, quote, a land grab, and saying that we are going to spend 5 to 10% of our market cap every couple of years to shore up our position. And my sense of the facts is that is in fact what has occurred. Facebook, as you conceded earlier that Instagram was a competitor of Facebook's. You acquired Instagram in 2012. Instagram is now the 6th largest social media platform in the world. Is that right?
Congressman, I'm not sure what rank it is, but it's certainly grown beyond our
I can represent to you that the statistics demonstrate that empirical data shows it's the 6th largest. In 2014, Facebook bought its competitor WhatsApp. Is that correct?
Congressman, yes, WhatsApp was also both a competitor and complementary. They competed with us in the space of mobile messaging, which is a growing and important space, and is, again, one part of the global space of how people connect more broadly.
Understood. And at that time, WhatsApp had over 400 million monthly users, a clear path towards 1 billion monthly active users. And WhatsApp is now the second largest social media platform in the world, with 2 billion users worldwide, more than Facebook Messenger. And of course, your company owns WhatsApp. Facebook also tried to buy other competitive startups. In fact, as Chairman Nadler noted, you did tell one of Facebook's senior engineers in 2012 that you can, quote, likely just buy any competitive startup, but it'll be a while before we can buy Google. Do you recall writing that email?
Congressman, I don't specifically, but it sounds like a joke.
Well, I don't take it as a joke. As I review the email, it was in regards to having just closed the Instagram sale. And the response from this individual, this engineer, to you was, quote, well played. Your response was, thanks. One reason people underestimate the importance of watching Google is that we can likely always just buy any competitive startups, but it'll be a while before we can buy Google. And given the purchases that Facebook had made previous to this and the attempted purchases, my understanding is that Facebook made several overtures to Snapchat, for example, which rebuffed those efforts, clearly demonstrates, in my view, that that email was not made in jest. But here's why I ask these questions, Mr. Zuckerberg. It strikes me that over the course of the last several years, Facebook has used its market power to either purchase or replicate the competition. And Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram are the most now downloaded apps of the last decade. Your company, sir, owns them all. And we have a word for that. That word is monopoly. With that, I would yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. I now recognize the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. McBath, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bezos, you referred to third-party sellers today as Amazon's partners and that your success depends on their success. But over the past year, we've heard a completely different story. As part of this investigation, we've interviewed many small businesses, and they use the words like bullying, fear, and panic to describe their relationship with Amazon. I'm going to share the story of a small business owner who is also a wife and a mother, so you can understand how this is actually affecting the lives of everyday people and why this truly matters.
We were a top bookseller on Amazon.com, and we worked day and night very hard towards growing our business and maintaining a 5-star feedback rating. Most importantly, this business feeds a total of 14 people, which includes 3 children and one 90-year-old granny. And as we grew, we were shrinking Amazon's market share in the textbooks category. So now in retaliation, Amazon started restricting us from selling. They started with a few titles in early 2019, and within 6 months, Amazon systematically blocked us from selling the full textbook category. We haven't sold a single book from the past 10 months or probably more. We were never given a reason. Amazon didn't even provide us with a notice as to why we were being restricted. There was no warning, there was no plan.
So, Mr. Bezos, after Amazon delisted the small business without any apparent reason or notice, she told us that they sent more than 500 separate communications to Amazon, including to you, Mr. Bezos, over the past year. There was not a single meaningful response. Do you think this is an acceptable way to treat someone that you described as both a partner and a customer?
No, Congresswoman, and I appreciate you showing me that anecdote, and I would like to talk to her. It does not at all to me seem like the right way to treat her, and I'm surprised by that. And it's not the systematic approach that we take, I can assure you. I don't even understand what's going on in that anecdote, because we would love for third-party sellers to sell books on the website.
Sir.
So I don't understand it, but I would like to understand it better. And with your permission, I would like to get in touch with your office.
I think, though, that you're missing the point. This is not just about one business. I'm concerned that this is a pattern of behavior, and basically this pattern of behavior has to change. Mr. Bezos, my question is simply, are you willing to make sure going forward that, the numerous sellers that we've talked to, they have problems just like this? And there are more sellers who have told us that they've exhausted all of their options before finally reaching out to you directly as a last resort, but they're still waiting for your response. So what do you have to say to the small businesses who are talking to Congress because you simply won't listen to them?
Well, I say that's not acceptable. If we aren't listening to you, I'm not happy about that at all. But I would, if you allow me to disagree a little bit with a piece of this, I do not think that's systematically what's going on. And the evidence that I would suggest would be useful for you to consider in that regard is that third-party sellers in aggregate are doing extremely well on Amazon. They grew from 20 years ago it was 0, and today it's 60% of sales. Third-party sellers are growing even faster than first-party retail.
Mr. Bezos,
Thank you.
thank you so much. You said that sellers have many other attractive options to reach customers, but that's not at all what we found in our investigation. According to eMarketer, a source Amazon cited in submissions to this committee, Amazon has nearly 7 times the market share of its closest e-commerce competitor. One seller told us that, and I quote, Amazon continues to be the only show in town. No matter how angry sellers get, they have nowhere else to go. So are you saying that these people aren't being truthful when they say that Amazon is the only game in town?
Yeah, Congresswoman, with great respect, I do disagree with that. I believe that there are a lot of options, and some of them are not even listed on that chart. I just looked at it briefly, but I didn't see some that I know of, for example. So I think there are a lot of things, and
thank
it's
you.
dynamic.
All right, thank you for that.
There are more and
Mr.
more
Bezos,
every day.
my time is short. If Amazon didn't have monopoly power over these sellers, do you think they would choose to stay in a relationship that is characterized by bullying, fear, and panic?
With all respect, Congresswoman, I do not accept the premise of your question. That is not how we operate the business.
All right.
And in fact, we work very hard to
Thank
provide
you for that.
fantastic
Thank you for
tools
that.
for sellers, and that's why they've been successful.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bezos, I'm going to close with giving the bookseller the opportunity to finally be heard by you.
Mr. Bezos, we increased our sales on Amazon by 5 times in the past 3 years. And we have contributed that much of proportional seller fees to Amazon. We have contributed that much to your business, to 5 times. We followed all the rules that were set by you. We please, just help us in earning a livelihood. We beg you. There are 14 lives at stake. Please, please, please help us get back on track.
With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentlelady. We've now concluded our first round. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Bezos, according to your testimony, the marketplace is competitive, but Amazon controls as much as 75% of all online marketplace sales. And eMarketer, a source you cited to us in submissions to this committee, reports that Amazon has nearly 7 times the market share of its closest competitor. Isn't it true that small businesses have no real option but to rely on Amazon to connect with customers and make online sales?
No, sir. With great respect, I do have a different opinion on that. I believe there are a lot of options for small sellers. I believe Amazon is a great one, and we've worked very hard. I think we are the best one.
Well,
we
Mr.
have
Bezos,
a lot of different programs that help sellers, but we
thank
are
you.
not the only option.
There are 2.2 million active sellers as of yesterday. About 37% of those sellers rely on Amazon as their sole source of income. That is over 800,000 people relying on Amazon to feed their families, put their kids through school, and keep a roof over their heads. Mr. Bezos, you have referred to third-party sellers as both your partners and customers. But isn't it true that Amazon refers to third-party sellers as internal competitors?
I think I wouldn't surprise me. In some ways, we are competing, and they're also competing with each other.
Well, that's right. Your
The
own
marketplace
documents,
does allow that.
Mr. Bezos, Amazon's own documents that you produce refer to the very same sellers that you've described as Amazon partners as internal competitors. In fact, we've heard from third-party sellers again and again during the course of the investigation that Amazon is the only game in town. One small business owner we interviewed described it this way, and I quote, "We're stuck. We don't have a choice but to sell through Amazon." Another said, and I quote, "They've never been a great partner, but you have to work with them." During this investigation, we have heard so many heartbreaking stories of small businesses who sunk significant time and resources into building a business and selling on Amazon, only to have Amazon poach their best-selling items and drive them out of business. So I want to talk to you about one company that really stood out from the rest. I want you to pay close attention to how they described your partnership, Mr. Bezos. We heard from a small apparel company that makes and sells what they call useful apparel for people who work on their feet and with their hands, like construction workers and firefighters. This particular business discovered and started selling a unique item that had never been a top seller for the brand. They were making about $60,000 a year on just this one item. One day they woke up and found that Amazon had started listing the exact same product, causing their sales to go to zero overnight. Amazon had undercut their price, setting it below what the manufacturer would generally allow it to be sold, so that even if they wanted to, they couldn't match the price. Here's how the apparel company described working with Amazon, and I quote, "Amazon strings you along for a while because it feels so good to get that paycheck every week. And in the past, for lack of a better term, we called it Amazon heroin because you just kept going and you had to get your next fix, your next check. But at the end of the day, you find out that this person who was seemingly benefiting you, making you feel good, was just ultimately going to be your downfall," end quote. So, Mr. Bezos, this is one of your partners. Why on earth would they compare your company to a drug dealer?
Sir, I have great respect for you in this committee, but I completely disagree with that characterization. What we have done is create in the store a place, if you go back in time, we sold only our own inventory. It was a very controversial decision inside the company to invite third-party sellers to come into what is really our most valuable retail real estate, our product detail pages. We did that because we were convinced that it would be better for the consumer. It would be better for the
Mr.
customer
Bezos,
to have all of that selection. And I think we were right, and I think it's worked out well for the
reclaiming my time.
customer, for
Unfortunately, this is
third-party
one of,
sellers, and for
reclaiming
myself.
my time, Mr. Bezos, this is one of many small companies that have told us during this year-long investigation that they were mistreated, abused, and tossed aside by Amazon. Now, Mr. Bezos, you say that Amazon is only focused on doing what's best for the customer. You just said it again, and that also third-party sellers. But how is that possible when you compete directly with third-party sellers with your own products that undercut the competition? Isn't it an inherent conflict of interest for Amazon to produce and sell products on its platform that compete directly with third-party sellers, particularly when you, Amazon, sets the rules of the game?
Thank you. No, I don't believe it is. We have the consumer is the one ultimately making the decisions. They're making the decisions about what to buy, what price to buy it at, who to buy it from. And what we try to do is
That's not the question, Mr. Bezos. The question
is
there an inherent conflict of interest because you are a data company? You know when customers put something in their cart, when they take it out. Traditional brick and mortar stores like a grocery store where competition occurs don't have that. And so I just want to follow up finally on an answer to the question that you gave to Congressman Jayapal. You said that you can't guarantee that the policy of not sharing third-party sellers' data with Amazon's own line hasn't been violated. You couldn't be certain. Can you please explain that to me? Can you list examples of where that policy has been violated? Because it's particularly concerning to me, Mr. Bezos, that shouldn't third parties know for sure that data isn't being shared with your own line, their competitors? Why should a third-party seller list their product on Amazon if they're just going to be undercut by Amazon's own product as a result of data you take from them?
Sir, I think what I want you to understand, and I think it's important to understand, is that we have a policy against using individual seller data to compete with our private label products.
You couldn't assure Ms. Jayapal that that policy isn't violated routinely.
Well, we are investigating that, and I do not want to sit here, and I do not want to go beyond what I know right now. But we are, as a result of that Wall Street Journal article, we are looking at that very carefully,
Thank you,
and
Mr.
we want to
Bezos.
get those facts. And I will surely share them with you.
Thank you, and we look forward to it. The evidence we've collected shows that Amazon has only interested in exploiting its monopoly power over the e-commerce marketplace to further expand and protect this power. This investigation makes clear that Amazon's dual role as a platform operator and competing seller on that platform is fundamentally anti-competitive, and Congress must take action. And with that, I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Sensenbrenner, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the history proves that Congress does a poor job in picking winners and losers. And I've looked over a lot of the material that has been assembled. I've been working with the chairman for over a year on this bipartisan investigation. And I have reached the conclusion that we do not need to change our antitrust laws. They have been working just fine. The question here is the question of enforcement of those antitrust laws. Now, we've heard a lot about the Facebook acquisition of Instagram. That happened in 2012. Obama's FTC signed off on that. So regardless of what you think has happened at that time, the fact is that this acquisition did pass the smell test of the regulators involved. Now, maybe they made a mistake or maybe something else happened, I don't know. But the fact is that there is not a problem with the law. Now, back about 35 years ago, AT&T was broken up because it was determined that one-stop shops were monopolistic. And AT&T, because you had to get your long-distance service from your local phone company, that was monopolistic. So the baby bells were spun off. A whole lot has happened since then. There were mergers and acquisitions in the telecom industry. Technology advanced a huge amount. And guess what? We're back to exactly where we were in 1984. So this goes to show that congressional pressure is not the best. Now, using the AT&T example, which I think was a big flop and counterproductive, let me ask Mr. Bezos, say the AT&T example was applied to Amazon, and you were required to spin stuff off. So you might have no more of a one-stop shop, but you have to go to separate places for books or groceries or videos or electronics. How are the consumers helped by that?
Sir, thank you. They would not be.
Right.
Very clear.
Now, Mr. Pichai, let me ask about Google. If you were forced to split up your business lines, say spin off ad tech and YouTube, can you describe what happens to consumers there?
Congressman, today, consumers in most of the areas we are dealing with, they see prices free or falling, and they get more choice than ever before. So I think it serves them well.
And you're right there. So, I'm not going to be on this committee in the next Congress. I am going to put my feet up and become a senior, quote unquote, statesman. But, let me say that we have heard a whole lot of complaints about big tech. Some of them are political in nature, and I share the complaints and the concern of Mr. Jordan and others. And others talk about allegedly anti-competitive activity. It seems to me that it's not for Congress that legislates to toss all of our antitrust laws and the precedent that has been established through litigation over the last 100+ years. But it's something where we ought to go back to the regulators, to the enforcers, have them look at this stuff, and have them make a determination on whether or not the law's been violated. I think the law's good on that, and we don't need to throw it all in the wastebasket. But there are some matters of concern that we have heard from both sides of the aisle that I think need to be addressed. And if it requires an agency like the FTC to say that they've made mistakes in the past, so be it. We're all human, we all make mistakes, and even government agencies do that. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, in March of 2012, you suggested by email to your management team that moving faster and copying other apps could, quote, prevent our competitors from getting footholds. Sheryl Sandberg responded that, quote, it is better to do more and move faster, especially if that means you don't have competitors build products that take some of our users. Facebook's product management director added that, quote, I would love to be far more aggressive and nimble in copying competitors. Has Facebook ever taken steps to prevent competitors from getting footholds by copying competitors?
Congresswoman, I view it as our job to understand what people are finding valuable in all of the services that they use. And certainly if someone...
Do you copy your competitors?
Congresswoman, we've certainly adapted features that others have let in, as have others copied and adapted features that
I'm not concerned about others. I'm just asking you, Mr. Zuckerberg, since March of 2012, after that email conversation, how many competitors did Facebook end up copying?
Congresswoman, I can't give you a number of companies.
Is it less than 5?
Congresswoman, I don't know.
Less than 50? Any estimates? Your team was making a plan. How did it play out?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure I agree with the premise here. Our job is to make sure that we build the best services for people to connect with all the people they care about. And a lot of that is done by innovating and by building new things that are leading the way internally.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. Let me go on. Has Facebook ever threatened to clone the products of another company while also attempting to acquire that company?
Congresswoman, not that I recall.
And I'd like to just remind you that you are under oath, and there are quotes from Facebook's own documents. Prior to acquiring Instagram, Facebook began developing a similar product called Facebook Camera, correct?
Congresswoman, that's correct. I've said multiple times that we were competing in the space of building mobile cameras with Instagram. That's what they did at the time. Their competitive set was companies like what we were building with Facebook Camera and ViscoCam and PicPlease.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. Did you ever use this very similar Facebook Camera product to threaten Instagram's founder, Kevin Systrom?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure what you would mean by threaten. I think it was public that we were building a camera app at the time. That was a well-documented thing.
Let me tell you that, in a chat, you told Mr. Systrom that Facebook was, quote, developing our own photo strategy, so how we engage now will also determine how much we're partners versus competitors down the line. Instagram's founder seemed to think that was a threat. He confided in an investor at the time that he feared you would go into, quote, destroy mode if he didn't sell Instagram to you. So let's just recap. Facebook cloned a popular product, approached the company you identified as a competitive threat, and told them that if they didn't let you buy them up, there would be consequences. Were there any other companies that you used the same tactic with while attempting to buy them?
Congresswoman, I want to respectfully disagree with the characterization. I think it was clear that this was a space that we were going to compete in one way or another. I don't view those conversations as a threat in any way.
I'm just using the documents and the testimony that the committee has collected from others. Did you warn Evan Spiegel, the founder of Snapchat, that Facebook was in the process of cloning the features of his company while also attempting to buy Snapchat?
Congresswoman, I don't remember those specific conversations, but that was also an area where it was very clear that we were going to be building something. People want to be able to communicate privately. They want to be able to communicate with all their friends at once. And we're going to make sure that we build the best products in all of the spaces that we can around helping people stay connected with the people they care about.
I appreciate that, Mr. Zuckerberg. I think the question again here is, when the dominant platform threatens its potential rivals, That should not be a normal business practice. Facebook is a case study, in my opinion, in monopoly power because your company harvests and monetizes our data, and then your company uses that data to spy on competitors and to copy, acquire, and kill rivals. You've used Facebook's power to threaten smaller competitors and to ensure that you always get your way. These tactics reinforce Facebook's dominance, which you then use in increasingly destructive ways. So Facebook's very model makes it impossible for new companies to flourish separately, and that harms our democracy, it harms mom and pop businesses, and it harms consumers. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Buck, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bezos, thank you for being here today. I'm concerned that you've used Amazon's dominant market position to unfairly harm competition. We've heard from a number of companies that Amazon uses proprietary data from third-party companies to launch its own private label products, meets with startups to discuss investing in the product, and then uses the proprietary data from these meetings to create its own private label products, allows the sale of counterfeit items through its web platform. During this subcommittee's field hearing in Boulder this January, PopSocket's CEO and inventor David Barnett detailed how Amazon allowed counterfeit products to appear on Amazon's marketplace ahead of PopSocket's products. Mr. Barnett told CNBC that PopSockets found at least 1,000 counterfeit products for sale on Amazon's marketplace, which Amazon allegedly failed to remedy until PopSockets agreed to a nearly $2 million marketing deal with Amazon. We've also seen troubling reports in the Wall Street Journal detailing Amazon's use of third-party sellers' proprietary data to develop and market its own competitive private label products. The Wall Street Journal also reported last week that Amazon's venture capital fund used meetings with unsuspecting startup companies to gain access to secret proprietary product information and financial details. Amazon then reportedly used that information to launch competing products, often disastrous results for the original startup company. There are many examples of this behavior, but one allegation in the journal's reporting sticks out in particular. In 2011, Amazon contacted Vocalife, LLC's inventor, about the possibility of investing in a speech detection technology. Vocalife's founder accepted the meeting, thinking this was the company's big break. After displaying Vocalife's microphone technology and providing proprietary information, including engineering data, to Amazon employees, the relationship came to an abrupt halt. Amazon employees allegedly stopped responding to emails before the technology eventually found its way into the Amazon's Echo device. These allegations are serious, especially because the size and scope of these practices couldn't happen without Amazon's monopolistic control of the marketplace. I'm also concerned that given Amazon's allowance of counterfeit goods on its marketplace, especially counterfeit goods from China, that Amazon's marketplace may be knowingly or unknowingly furthering China's use of forced and slave labor conditions. This is especially important following recent reports that at least 80 global companies that sell on the Amazon marketplace, including Nike, Starbucks, and Samsung, have ties to Chinese factories that use enslaved Uyghur Muslims. Following these concerning reports, Senator Hawley introduced an important bill last week requiring American businesses to certify that their supply chain does not rely on forced labor. I will be introducing the House companion bill later this afternoon. While I do not expect you to have intimate knowledge of the legislation, I do want to ask all four of our witnesses a simple yes or no question. Will you certify here today that your company does not use and will never use slave labor to manufacture your products or allow products to be sold on your platform that are manufactured using slave labor? Mr. Cook, you were kind enough to visit with me on the phone. I think we briefly discussed this issue. If you can give a yes or no answer, and I understand you haven't read the details of the bill, but would you agree to this idea?
I would love to engage on the legislation with you, Congressman, but let me be clear, forced labor is abhorrent. And we would not tolerate it in Apple. And so I would love to get with your office and engage on the legislation.
Thank you. Mr. Pichai.
Congressman Pichai, your concern in this area, I find it abhorrent as well. Happy to engage with your office and discuss this further.
So I really don't want to even engage with my office half the time. Will you guys agree that slave labor is not something that you will tolerate in manufacturing your products or in products that are sold on your platforms?
I agree, Congressman.
And Mr. Cook?
We wouldn't tolerate it. We would terminate a supplier relationship if it were found.
Mr. Zuckerberg?
I agree. We wouldn't tolerate this, and if we found anything like this, we would also terminate any relationship.
And Mr. Bezos?
Yes, I agree completely.
Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Buck for that excellent line of questioning and for the upcoming legislation. I look forward to joining that. We want, you know, in the 19th century, we had the robber barons. In the 21st century, we got the cyber barons. And we want to make sure that the extraordinary power and wealth that you've been able to amass is not used against the interests of democracy and human rights around the world, and not against the interests of a free market at home. So, Mr. Bezos, let me turn to you. I'm interested in the role that you play as a gatekeeper. A lot of consumers want to know when the HBO Max app will be available on your Fire device, and I understand that negotiations are ongoing, but that your company is not only asking for financial terms, but also for content from Warner Media. Is that right, and is that a fair way to proceed? In other words, is it fair to use your gatekeeper status role in the streaming device market to promote your position as a competitor in the video streaming market with respect to content?